everyone! I have been reading some really good books that I would just love to share with you. The first book that I've recently read that I thought you would enjoy is called My Two Blankets by Irina Cobbold, illustrated by Freya Blackwood. Have you ever moved to a new place? Probably was a pretty scary feeling where everything was new and different. Now imagine if you moved to that new place, but everything was very different. Different language, so you couldn't understand anyone. Different surroundings, different smells, people looked different. Well, that's what happened to Cartwheel in this story. Her and her family had to move to the United States, away from their home country, because it wasn't safe anymore with the war going on. And so everything was so new and different. And the only thing that would make her feel safe and comfortable was imagining what it was like back at home, her home language, her home food. And she used to imagine it was like a big warm blanket comforting her. Well, she meets a girl in the park, and this girl smiles at her. And Cartwheel is a little scared and uncertain because it is so new and different. But as she begins to be friends with this little girl, it makes her think that maybe she needs to make a new blanket. If you'd like to read a story about kindness and friendship, read My Two Blankets. Baseball. That's America's pastime. Everyone loves to play or watch baseball. But imagine if someone told you that you could not play baseball, or that you couldn't even be in your favorite sport or your favorite activity. Well, that's what people told Lizzie Murphy when she was little, because back in the 1900s, girls did not play baseball. But she didn't let that stop her. She did all that she could. She fought every chance she could to be able to play baseball. She proved to her brother and his friends how good she was. But as she grew older, she still had people telling her she could not play baseball. Her mom told her that women and men just had different roles, and she needed to find something else to do besides playing baseball. So she tried to listen, but she had to make a choice. Was she going to give up on her dream, or was she going to keep working hard to have the opportunity to someday play on a professional baseball team? Read the inspiring true story, Queen of the Diamond, the Lizzie Murphy story, by Emily Arnold McCulley. Why were you going the wrong way, little one? That's what Vivian wondered when she found a baby turtle in the sand that never made it home to the ocean. When Vivian moved to her new school, the teacher gave the class an assignment that they needed to discover a problem and try to think of ways to solve the problem. Well, Vivian knew that this was the problem to solve. So with a little bit of research and the help of her class, they had to find out, why do these sea turtle hatchlings not make it to the ocean, and what can they do to help? Follow the Moon Home, a tale of one idea, 20 kids, and 100 sea turtles, by Philippe Cousteau and Deborah Hopkinson. Read this inspiring story of how 20 kids became advocates for a bunch of baby turtles. One plastic bag. Is it useful? Can it cause any harm? Now, what if we had 1,000 of these plastic bags? Are they still useful? Are they still just harmless? That was the question that this character asked in this story. One plastic bag, Aisatto Sei and the Recycling Women of the Gambina. On the way home, Aisatto found a plastic bag on the ground. She discovered that it had some uses. She was able to carry things in it. But when the bag broke, what use was it? It just became trash. And more people in the village discovered these plastic bags, and before you know it, the village was covered in plastic bag waste. Some of the animals started to eat the plastic bags and become sick. It was beginning to be a problem. So Aisatto knew something had to be done. So in secret, she gathered some women from the village, and they started to come up with some ideas of how they could reuse or recycle these plastic garbage bags. So, if you want to see how recycling can save a village, read One Plastic Bag, Aisatto Sei and the Recycling Women of the Gambina by Miranda Paul, based on a true story of how some creative thinking was able to make a big difference. Ada's Violin, the story of the recycled orchestra of Paraguay. Another interesting story about recycling that's also based on a true story. Now, imagine if you really wanted to play music and you love music, but you just couldn't afford an instrument, and a place where an instrument is more expensive than a house. And so owning one is almost impossible. Well, that was Ada's reality. She loved music. She experienced music with her family. And the thought of being able to make her own music was something very exciting, but it probably was going to be out of reach because her family could not afford a violin so that she could learn how to play. So this was the reality for many of the children in the village of where they lived in Paraguay. So some men in the village decided that the only thing that they could do was use the materials that they had, which was discarded items and trash. So they came together and made some very innovative, creative instruments and became the Recycled Orchestra of Paraguay. To read this true story and see how this orchestra started and actually is still thriving today, read Ada's Violin, the story of the Recycled Orchestra of Paraguay by Susan Hood. Now, these last two are especially my favorites, some recent chapter books that I've read. Crenshaw by Katherine Applegate. There's always a logical explanation, I told myself, and part of me, the scientist part of me, really wanted to figure out what that was. That was Jackson. Jackson feels that everything has a logical explanation, except for some things he's recently experiencing. After many years, Crenshaw, his imaginary friend, who's not an ordinary imaginary friend, shows up. And he's not really able to explain why he's there or how he appeared. And it might have something to do with the things that have been really difficult for Jackson and his family. His dad is sick and lost his job. They're having to sell most of their belongings. And he's really feeling worried about his family's future. He tries to look on the bright side, but that's really hard when you're hungry and you're trying to explain to your little sister why you're having to sell things and why you cannot have everything you want. And when things are becoming at their worst, that's when his unlikely friend Crenshaw shows up. And even though he's not able to explain it and he thinks he might be going crazy, he might just learn that there's a very reasonable explanation. And another chapter book that has become one of my favorites, Fish in a Tree by Linda Mullally Hunt. Can you read this? You know, some students have trouble reading every time they pick up a text. Words, sentences, books are almost impossible to read. If you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, it will live its whole life believing it's stupid. That's what Allie Nickerson thought. She thought she was stupid because she felt like a fish trying to climb a tree. So it was easier for her to be the troublemaker, to cause problems so that nobody would notice that she's having trouble in reading and writing until she meets a new teacher. This teacher has taken some notice in her. He sees how smart she really is and some of her abilities. Now, she's not too sure if she's going to trust this teacher, and she still wonders if she's ever going to learn to read or write, or if she's ever going to be able to climb that tree. Read Fish in a Tree to learn how someone can overcome some challenges. Lastly, let's look at some book trailers for some of my two favorite books and see if you're able to want, or if you're enjoying them and you would like to read them.